My name is Christy Busby, and you are about to listen to the next episode of my podcast called F.A.T.E, From Atheism to Enlightenment. So come on in, join me. We're going to talk about it all, from atheism to enlightenment. Alrighty, guys, here we go. Get ready, and welcome to your F.A.T.E. Welcome, everyone, to Season 2 of the F.A.T.E podcast. How's everybody doing today? I'm your host, Christy Busby. I am very excited to bring you Season 2. I've been off the last almost 2 months now, and I have been interviewing people from all over the world. Australia, New Zealand, England. I have been talking with people that have their own perspectives, their own spiritual journeys, their own concepts that they're bringing to the show. And I can't wait to bring them to you. I'm going to talk just a few minutes, recap Season 1. If you are a newcomer to the show, thank you for joining me. Welcome to your F.A.T.E. And if you haven't recapped Season 1 of this podcast, you don't have to go back and watch every single episode or listen to every single episode, but I do encourage you to at least listen or watch episode 1 just to get an understanding of what my perspective is, where I was coming from. I'll do a smaller version of that before I introduce our first episode of the season. Basically, folks, I was an atheist my whole life. I believed very heavily in science. I believed that when you died, you were done. You were like a tree. You were born, you grew, you died, and you went back to the earth. And it was only through a health crisis that I started opening my mind and putting my toe in the world of spirituality through like energy healing and things of that nature. And it really threw open a door for me. And here I am. I ended up starting a podcast to talk to people about spirituality, what the nature of our reality is. And I've just been on my own journey, and I've been welcoming everyone who is going to step on this path with me. And quite frankly, whether you're just stepping on your path, you're already well into spirituality, or you're curious, I have something for everyone this season. Season 1, I did a lot of psychics, mediums, energy healing. I went into some religious stuff. And I loved all of my guests. I'm still in contact with most of them. And I was so very lucky to get the kind of people to join me for just me kind of pulling this out of nowhere and deciding that I was going to do a podcast. And it's only gotten better, folks. I really, this season, have had just amazing stories to bring you. I just can't wait. I hope you hang in there with me. I really am just asking questions. I'm open-minded. I'm walking in this direction. And I want to continue to bring people, perspectives, and ask all the big questions out there. What are we doing here? What's the nature of reality? What is death? Do we die? I am starting to address a lot of these very important questions, in my opinion. In Season 2, I talk about everything from astrology to meditation to psychedelics to religion. Again, it's really a broad-based Season 2 so far. I just can't tell you enough that I have been enjoying the conversations, really have learned so much. These last few weeks since I've been off, I have been developing a practice of meditation. I have been learning to sit in silence more. I used to be somebody that would be on the television all the time. If I was home, I had a TV on, I had a radio on, I had something on, and now I sit more in silence than I ever have, and I am still and I look within. It has been deeply um, opening for me. I really feel a lot more peaceful, a lot more at peace. What else? I started working with a pendulum and I'm trying to work with my intuition and tap into my higher self, my spirit guides. Trying to open up my clairs, clairaudience, clair sentient, all of those things. We all have that little intuition, that inner voice. I'm trying to listen to that more. And I'm just trying to step into my new way of being. I've kind of started shedding an old self, old habits, old ways of interacting with people. I've even not phased out friends, but people have kind of fallen out of my life and other people have come into my life. This podcast has been incredibly easy for me to step into. The guests are virtually coming to me. It has been almost strange how the universe has opened this door and allowed it to be sort of a easy, smooth um process, and I have been super passionate about it. um I really haven't been doing much else these last couple of weeks other than reading books, meditating, walking in nature, sitting in gratitude, interviewing people, and working on this show. I've been a recluse. I haven't gone to have a coffee with anyone. I haven't had dinner with anyone. I really haven't ventured out a lot. I've really been looking within and working on my health. If you're just joining me on this journey, I have had health issues and I had a resurgence a few months ago of some symptoms, and I have also been working on my health again. And I'm actually going to a quantum healing um, in October, and I will be bringing Dr. Holly Duckworth on the show after the quantum healing session. And I really am anticipating coming back a fully healed human being. And I'm manifesting that and I am meditating on that. And I believe the universe will bring that to me. Based on the concepts that I have learned, there is no reason why it shouldn't happen, folks. So, recap season 1 if you are at all interested. There's some really good episodes in there. The one with Dr. Holly Duckworth about quantum healing. Dave Schrader joins me, who is a huge paranormal person. And, you know, Erica Frost, Alicia with her alchemy light. I mean, Brandy, my friend, who is turned into quite the medicine woman these days. She'll be coming on the show, I'm sure. Um, Check it out. So for those of you who have continued to stand by while I was on hiatus, working on myself and getting myself together, I appreciate you coming back and starting season 2 with me. I'm excited for this journey. I am looking forward to any kind of feedback. I'm on Instagram. I'll be talking about that at the end of the show, but I am on Instagram at F.A.T.E Podcast. It's F.A.T.E Podcast. Follow me, subscribe, give me a like, something. I really do want to be able to reach as many people as I possibly can with this podcast. And I'm going to start leaning a little bit more heavily on you in order to make that happen. So if you are going to enjoy the show and you like what I'm saying and doing and speaking about, tell a friend, share it, and let people join me on this path. It's been exciting. Um, so I am going to be bringing you an episode, and let me tell you a little bit about it. This episode, if you're watching this on YouTube, you're not going to see me or my guest on this season opener. They did the woman that I interviewed, she did not want her face on camera. She wants her privacy, and it's really more due to her well, let me just tell you what it's about. I'm about to present to you a story that will blow your mind. There was a woman in England, and she's a teacher, and this happened years ago. She's now retired, in her 70s, lives in England. The boy who she speaks with and had a relationship with, he's still alive. He wants to be known as a normal child or a normal adult now. He's an adult. But she met this autistic boy when she was a teacher 20 something, 30 something years ago. And they ended up having this connection and were able to communicate telepathically. And she tells this fantastical story of their relationship over the last decades, about how they came into be, how they had a soul contract prior to coming down here, how this young boy was looking for his teacher, even at the the young age of 4. He was spiritually connected to a higher realm and had an emotional intelligence, even though verbally he couldn't verbalize it. He was autistic. He had verbal communication issues, and she was a special ed teacher that was in the school that was teaching nonverbal kids, autistic kids. And it is one of the most incredible stories I've ever heard. She wrote a book about it. This gentleman, his name's Asher in the book. He is somebody that has an ability to tap into higher realms and speak about what the nature of our reality is, and give premonitions and talk about all types of different concepts that he was able to telepathically communicate to her throughout the years. So that story's coming up. The book is called A Mind Beyond Words. And I really encourage you to go and pick it up, because it is unlike anything I have ever heard. And I truly believe it could change your perspective entirely about what you think we are, what we're doing here, and the full capacity of being the beings that we are. And I do think that we are eternal beings of light, and that there is so much more going on. And I say that a lot on this podcast, but it is true. There is so much more going on in our reality, in our being, than we are allowed to know, maybe. We certainly, I don't think, know our true history, or the depths to which we are um, powerful and capable of creating, manifesting, and pulling in things into our reality based on our thoughts, our beliefs, our words, speaking, spelling, and our belief system. So these are all concepts that I go into for season 2. I've really been so excited and blown away by the caliber of people that I've been able to interact with. They all have their own spiritual journeys, perspectives, and I'm going to bring them to you every week until I'm not. I'm hoping that I can continue this for as long as possible, and I plan on journeying in this arena until the universe plucks it away from me or things change. But I'm on this journey. I am hoping that you come with me and open your mind, expand yourself, and understand that maybe we don't have it all figured out. I certainly thought that I had it all figured out at one point, many points in my life, for the most of my life. I would have laughed at some of this years ago and disregarded it and chalked it up as woo woo and nuts and, all of that. And I do think that I had to go through an awakening through a tragic event, my health. I think that a lot of people end up changing their minds and evolving through tragic circumstances. And I keep saying this, a lot of people need to be shaken to awaken. You need something to rock you to your core that snaps you out of the fog of thinking you know it all and thinking you have everything understood. And when you go through something traumatic, sometimes it allows you to step on your path. And although not everyone is meant to awaken in this lifetime, I do think there are more and more people out there that are questioning what this reality is, that are starting to ask questions about who we really are. Are we alone? Is there more to life than working 60 hours a week until you're almost dead? Is there's got to be some other reason why we're all here? So these are all my questions. These are all things that I'm interested in. And I have been, like I said, interviewing people from all over the world these last few weeks. And I am excited to bring you their stories, to bring these concepts, and to ask these questions. And I hope that you enjoy season 2 and follow the show, like, subscribe, tell a friend. And on that note, guys, I'm going to go ahead and bring you episode 1 of the F.A.T.E podcast. And I'm going to say, welcome to your fate, everyone. Journey with me. Enjoy season 2. I will see you on the other side of the show. Little reminder, you won't see me or my guest on this episode. It is a fantastic story, and I hope you enjoy it. Journey well, everyone. I'll see you on the other side. Welcome, everyone, to the next episode of F.A.T.E. How's everybody doing today? On today's show, I am bringing you a remarkable woman. She has a story to tell that will make you open your mind, change your perspective, and really think about what and who we are. Her name's Jess Curzon. She has a book out called A Mind Beyond Words, and I am ever so grateful and thankful she has come here today to tell me her journey. Jess, welcome to your F.A.T.E. How you doing today?
I'm very well, Christy, and thank you so much for having me on your show. It's a real honor to meet you.
I absolutely am excited to tell your journey. I read your book. It is remarkable, and I really think it's going to impact anyone who reads it very deeply. So let's get into it. Let's start talking about what exactly your journey is, how it began. I know that you are a teacher that was teaching in a school that was dealing with autistic kids, people or young people that were nonverbal. I don't want to tell too much of your story. I'm going to hand it off to you, and please tell me your journey.
Well, just that. Okay. Uh, as you've said, I've been a teacher all my working life. I'm retired now, but that's what I always did. Started off just teaching in normal schools, like elementary school age. Then I got a transfer to a school for children with, or a class within a school for children with speech and language difficulties. They were in a mainstream school, but we had this special little class with just 10 kids. And I kind of fell into that by some odd synchronicities, and it felt like I was being nudged along the way a bit. But I loved the job, loved the work. I worked there for 7 years or so, I think, before one particular child entered the class who changed my life, to be frank. He just was very different. And yeah, meeting this kid has just completely altered the trajectory of the way I've lived the rest of my life. So, yeah.
What can you talk a little bit of the kid that we are speaking of? You call him Asher in the book. And just so everybody's aware, if you're watching this on YouTube, I do have Jess's face concealed due to keeping and remaining respectful of her privacy, as well as the individual that we're going to be speaking about. That is a giant part of her journey. Neither one of them want to be in the public eye, so I have concealed your identity so we can talk openly about your journey without revealing your true identity. And so I just wanted to put that little disclaimer out there. But Asher, correct me if I'm wrong, he was an autistic boy. Can you talk a little bit about his disabilities or his abilities? Both of them, I guess.
Yeah, he's got both in equal measure, I suppose.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
he came to me as a 6-year-old. He'd been in a mainstream school for a few terms, and his parents had expected that mixing with other kids, he'd start to learn to use speech, because his speech was very limited. He couldn't make many sounds. He had muscle problems in his mouth, which is called oral dyspraxia. And like the other children in my class, he couldn't really make himself understood very well beyond a few words. And I gradually got to know his way of speaking. But he also had a diagnosis on the autistic spectrum, and he found the whole conversation and friendship bit really quite difficult. He was quite a withdrawn little boy when he first came to me, but he was very intelligent. I mean, of well above average intelligence in terms of what he could do academically. And he was just a curious mixture. And that I thought, well, fine, this sort of fits in with my class. But a few weeks into having him join the class, I found I was kind of losing my grip on teaching and on the class. It was as if I was being sabotaged somehow, and I couldn't figure out what was going on and why my lessons were all going a bit weird. And eventually it clicked with me. The thing that had changed was that this kid had joined my class. So I started watching him really carefully, and sure enough, he was the one behind all the little things that were going wrong. He'd hide a piece of equipment that was necessary for the lesson, or he'd get the other kids all sort of muttering and whispering under their breaths when they were supposed to be listening to me, or he'd answer a question wrong on purpose and then tell me I'd misheard him. And it was just kind of silly little things, but it all mounted up. In the end, I took him aside and said, "Why are you doing this? Why are you mucking up all my lessons?" And he just turned round and gave the hugest smile you can imagine and said, "You." And I had no idea what he was talking about. And he explained to me as best he could with his very limited language that since he was very little, about 3 or 4 years old, he'd set about searching for someone he remembered making a soul agreement with. He called it a deal. And he remembered this from before he was born. He had made this agreement. He just didn't know what this person who was going to be his special helper looked like when he got to planet Earth. So he had to find that person. And he did it by doing these little tricks and tests on most of the adults that he came into contact with until he found the right person. And by the time he was 6, he was getting fairly fed up hunting around and finding that nobody understood what he was up to. And because I realized what he was doing, I was apparently the one that he'd chosen to work with. And so, yeah, that's what he told me. And that was fairly mind-blowing.
After you had learned that you had made a soul contract with this young man at some point on your spiritual journey, how long was it before you understood that you guys had a greater connection than just teacher student, that there was something more beyond the normal way that you would interact with your students? At what point did you start understanding there was much more going on in this relationship?
It was kind of like an unfolding over several years, to be honest. I mean, I started to realize after that conversation with him that there was something quite interesting about this child. But at that point, I assumed this deal was just to help him to learn to speak, which was my job anyway. But it did become clear that it was more than that. There were various happened in both their lives, because normally a teacher and a pupil are together for a year, maybe 2 or 3 years, but no more than that. He's now 33, and we're still good mates. So, yeah, it's gone on a long time, and various things happened. You know, he was supposed to leave my class, and then suddenly we ended up in the same room together, and I was teaching him again, and he was supposed to be leaving, and then something else happened that were just all sorts of odd things that went on, and we just stuck together. And the older he got and the better he got at using speech, the more I understood that he had things to teach me. And as we are now, he's the teacher and I'm the student. Quite definitely, our roles have changed.
So let's talk a little bit about telepathy, because that's basically what the basis for your teacher student, as far as him being the teacher and you being the student, it was much more based on a telepathic connection that you both had, where he could communicate you beyond words, beyond 3D plane reality. And you also write in your book that the children within the group could also communicate with each other nonverbal using telepathic means. Can you talk a little bit about
Yeah.
what that is, how that transpired?
Yeah. Yes, that was another strange thing that happened just around the time that he joined the class. I'd been working in this unit for years, and I'd never realized, or I'd never seen any evidence of the children having any communication apart from, trying to learn to speak and trying to understand each other. But soon after Asher joined the class, and I don't think it was a coincidence, I started to realize that the children were communicating amongst themselves, but it wasn't through speech. There was something else going on. And I've given in A Mind Beyond Words, I've given an example of a day they were out in the school playground and they were all playing a game together, and I was watching them and realized that this game had a storyline. Everybody knew what they were doing, everyone knew where they were supposed to be, and there wasn't a single word being spoken. And I remember having that moment when I just thought, "Oh, grief, these kids are communicating on some other level. This is some sort of telepathy. And I had two thoughts after that. One was, I'd better keep this to myself, because if I start saying stuff like that around the staff room, then people are going to think that I'm a complete wacko. And the second thing was, I want to learn more about this. I want to understand this. And the children seemed to pick that up. And they started to teach me. And there were, well, 3 adults regularly working in our classroom and various other people as well. Nobody else picked up on this at all, to my knowledge. There was no one else who understood what was going on, but there was just, the children had decided to take me into their little telepathic world, if you like. So I felt very honored.
That is incredible. It really is. Can you talk a little bit about some of the concepts that Asher opened your mind to? Can you talk a little bit about the realms, our subtle light navigation systems, and he goes into really amazing concepts that he is able to glean because he has a higher level of access to information that we in the 3D world do not have. Can you talk a little bit about the realms and what he was able to enlighten you with as far as what our reality is and how it works and how energy works and all of that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we're leaping ahead to
Yes,
him
we're
with an adult's mind here rather than as a 6-year-old child. But
yes.
yeah, it gradually developed in his teens. He started to tell me that he went somewhere else. There was this other place he could visit, and he said, I can't very much about it because there aren't any words in our language to describe it. And at that time, we hadn't really worked very hard on my telepathic abilities, so I couldn't really pick that much up from him, and he got quite frustrated. But as he grew older and as I started to really focus in on the telepathy side, we did start to make this connection so that he became able to get stuff across to me without using words, without having to speak to me, which meant that he could put concepts into my mind that he didn't have access to verbally, if that makes sense. So at that point, he started telling me about what I assume is something like astral flying. He was able to just move out of his body and explore this. He said it's not a place because it's beyond time. It isn't a physical place, but a dimension, a sort of psychological landscape, I think was the sort of closest I got to it in words, where he's able to access knowledge directly. And he said, the picture he gave me in my mind, because quite often his messages to me don't come through to me in words, they come through in pictures or mind movies. And I saw this huge library. And he said, yeah, that's what it's like. So it's like a library, and you can go there and you're just drawn to, if you've got a question, you're just drawn to the right part of the library. And he said, it's like a very subtle, clever search engine that will just take you to exactly the right place. And you can find out anything there is. I think other people have said it sounds like the Akashic Records, and I have to admit it does sound like that. So, but he doesn't have, labels that he puts on it, but he just calls them the realms. So, yeah, that's about the best way I can describe it.
Can you talk a little bit about how your relationship developed going back into the train rides and how he was kind of explaining to you how intention and energy works, like the scenario with the water bottle on the train? I thought that was a really interesting example of how we are capable of kind of creating things within our own reality if we use intention and focus. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah. We got into this habit of going on train rides because um, I was having to look after him quite a lot when his mother was very ill. And, well, I wasn't having to, I chose to look after him. And I'd take him out on weekend trips, and he loved the trains. So we'd go on rides from our local town down to London, which was about an hour away. And it gave us a long time to talk together. And one time he wanted to explain to me basically how manifesting works and how we can change our reality. And his example was we were sitting in a train carriage, and it had one of those tables between the two seats. And so we were sitting opposite each other at a table in a carriage. And he'd got a plastic bottle of water on his side of the table. And he said to me, "Okay, so how could you move this bottle of water from over to your side without touching it?" And I sort of went, "Well, it's full of water, so it's too heavy to blow. And the table's bolted down to the carriage floor, so I can't shut the table." I said, it's going to be something mystical and esoteric, isn't it?" And he went, "Yeah." So he said, "It's very easy. Just see it where you want it to be. Just with all of your intention, with all of your focus, see that bottle as being where we've chosen for it to be. Just do that." And so I sat there and tried to think of this bottle as being on my side of the table, and he sat there smiling and watching the bottle as well. And a few minutes later, the guard came into our carriage. And in England, the guard comes and checks everybody's ticket. Well, he came up to our table, he took my ticket, checked it, gave it back to me. He took Ash's ticket, checked it, gave it back to him. That could have taken only seconds. And then, for some reason, which had nothing to do with logic, this guard picked up the water bottle from Ash's side, moved it to my side, and then walked on through the carriage. And I just sat there with my mouth hanging wide open, and Asher was just grinning and saying, "See, it's easy."
I mean, it is such a fascinating story of how much more powerful we are with intention, with energy than we would ever imagine that we're capable of. It is just mind-blowing. How about what is subtle light navigation? What did he explain to you that was within our lifetime, this concept of being pulled in a direction and having the free will to navigate life, but that our inner pull is always there helping us along in a way to where we're supposed to be?
Yeah, yeah, I really like this. And it actually works better in England than it does in the States, because in England, in a car, you call what you call GPS, we call it sat nav, which is short for
Mm.
satellite navigation. And so his subtle light navigation is kind of a pun on that, but it doesn't work so well with
Uh,
GPS.
I
When I
got it.
talk about sat nav, I'm talking about GPS, okay?
Gotcha.
He said it works exactly like that. It's very subtle, but there's something that is nudging our lives, if you like, the sort of blueprint that we brought in with us, or the guides, however you want to imagine what it is nudging our lives in one direction rather than another, because we've decided before we were born that we wanted to achieve certain things, not in great detail, but just hey, in this lifetime, I'd really like to try out what it feels like to do this or to explore that or whatever. And our sat nav, subtle light navigation, gives us the chance to head in the right direction to a place where that would happen. I'm sure that was what was happening to me when I found myself teaching in that specialist student and turn up a few years later. So it's something, and I said to him when he first explained this to me, well, what about free will? We've always, it feels like we've got free will. Are we actually being controlled? And he said, oh, no, you've got completely free will. He said, if you're driving along in a car and your sat nav stroke GPS tells you turn left at the next junction, you can choose to carry straight on down the road. There's nothing forcing you to turn at that junction. And he said, you don't have to follow the nudges that you're given. And I said, so what happens if we keep ignoring it? If we just keep ignoring that guidance we're being given? And he said, well, it's just the same as in a car. It just recalibrates and finds a different method to get you to where you wanted to go. I think that's fairly neat analogy,
Fascinating.
really. Yeah.
So enlightening. Can you talk a little bit about at some point his mother, Asher's mother, gets sick and she ends up passing away, and you end up communicating with her using a crystal pendulum of sorts. Can you talk a little bit about how you were able to access Nina in the book and have some sort of communication with her and with regards to Asher?
Yeah, I mean, it's a long story and I won't go into all of that because obviously it's in a mind beyond words. But yeah, she, in an extremely clever way, after she passed over a few years afterwards, he was going through a rough time and she decided she needed to connect with me because she'd asked me in her final days if I would be a mentor, an eye on him after he'd moved out of my class, which I agreed to do very happily. And so it was several years after I'd stopped teaching him, but he was going through puberty. I suppose he was having quite a tough time. There were things going on in his life. And she decided from the other side that he needed a bit of help. And so she made contact with me. And I'd never had any contact with people beyond the veil. I was not a medium. At first, I thought when I was getting these feelings that it must be a wrong number, that this couldn't possibly be intended for me. And then suddenly I realized it was her. And then I sort of thought, well, how am I going to get her messages through? Because I couldn't hear anything. I couldn't see anything. I just knew she was there, was actually applying pressure to a part of my body that showed me that she wanted to make contact. And that was quite painful. And I thought, I've got to find a less painful way of doing this. So I had, by one of my nudges, one of my sat-nav nudges, very recently bought a crystal pendulum. It wasn't an expensive one, just a little pendulum on a chain that you can just buy at any crystal shop. And I thought, well, I could use that. So I held this pendulum the way I'd learned to in the magazine article I'd read, and said, is this message from Nina? And it waved back and forth madly, which was its way of saying yes. And I said, have you got a message for me? And I got another yes. And is it about somebody in your family? And I yes. And then I thought, oh, hang on, now what do I do? Because not all the answers are going to be yes and no answers. I can't sit here guessing for the rest of time. So my next step was to make a sheet of paper with a circle on it, a big circle, kind of like a pizza cut into wedges. And I put various people in her family around the edge of these wedges at the circle, and held the pendulum still in the middle. And I said, "So who's it about?" Yeah, it wasn't just her family, it was their extended sort of people in their lives and myself and so forth. And I also made myself a second circle that had, I don't think emojis have been invented then, but I drew something a bit like emojis, so I had a sort of happy face and a sad face and stuff like that. So between these two circles and using my pendulum, I was able to figure out what it was she wanted me to help with, which was actually a sort of problem in Ash's life. And so we managed to get across to each other, but even that was a bit limiting. So my next step was to write the alphabet on a piece of paper as a sort of arc of going from A through to Z. And then I'd wait with the pendulum, keeping it very still, and it would spell out, like on a kind of Ouija board, I suppose, it would spell out messages from her. And after I'd mastered that, she was actually able to give me quite detailed information, sort of one very, very important piece, which was thing that Asher had said to her when she was in a coma, and he'd assumed that she hadn't understood or heard anything because she'd been unresponsive, and she was able to dictate to me everything that went on at that meeting, which included him saying to her that he loved her and saying goodbye to her, and he thought she died without knowing or what he'd said, but this proved to him that, yeah, she'd been understanding and hearing him all along. So, yeah, that's how I use my
It's
pendulum.
remarkable. Has she ever tried to reach out to you with regards to Asher or anything else again? Or was that really, once that communication and you were able to understand what she was wanting you to do, that fell away?
It largely fell away. I had a couple of other little bits. It's like she was watching from a distance, but not wanting to sort of dig in and change everything around. But just occasionally, sometimes I would sit down and, focus on her and say, "Can you pick me up? I've, got a bit of a problem. I don't quite know how to deal with what's going on here." Teenage kids can, life gets a bit difficult for them. Yeah, she'd give me short responses, but never quite the way she did in that instance. And I haven't had any connection with her for many years now.
Interesting. I'd like to, in the book, Asher has some premonitions about what is coming up for humanity. And he talks a little bit about a financial collapse and some disasters. And I'm wondering, was there any more insights in there as far as what Asher was trying to relay to you about what is coming up for this 3D plane and what can expect? I was interested when I read that in the book.
Yeah, that was on another of our train journeys, and he was about 15 at that time. He was quite a young lad. And I remember distinctly him suddenly, his face just clouded. And he said, "Oh, I've just seen something and it's not nice." And he was not quite sure he wanted to tell me, but basically what he was saying was that there were going to be disasters in the world. There was going to be a heavy loss of life. There was going to be things changing, and the main thing that would be changing would be a financial collapse. He was just saying that money would be that it wouldn't go on the way that it is at the moment. And he said that's going to change everything. It's going to change the way people think about things, and it's going to divide humanity into two distinct types. He said there's going to be the people who are scrabbling around for their possessions, trying to hold on to everything material that they can keep because they feel so lost without all the stuff. And there's going to be the other people who just let it go and say, okay, well, that part of our lives has fallen away, but what have we got? Try and work together and let's just move on to something that is post-material, I suppose, moving into a much more spiritual way of being. And I asked him since about it and said, do you still feel that's going to happen? And he said, oh, it will happen. He said, there's lots of paths, lots of ways it could happen, but he said they all lead to this one thing happening. And he said, I don't know when. It just depends on the way humanity behaves and the choices that people make.
I mean, I do feel like we are living in very dystopian times. And I certainly don't want to think about anything disastrous happening because I do believe that you manifest things and you have to be careful about what you're thinking, what you're saying, because they have more power than you think that it does. But at the same time, I do see and feel this tremendous amount of negativity and division and the wars and our obsession with things and consuming and wealth and luxury. And then the other side of the journey of that is living in lack and barely being able to sustain yourself. There just seems to be a lot that could go wrong within the world that we're living in at this juncture. So when I read that, I thought that made a lot of sense to me. I was just kind of wondering if that is something I'm going to be living through, or is that something that is going to happen in the distant future? Who knows?
Yeah. And actually,
Who
it's
knows?
interesting. What you've just said has made me realize why he doesn't want to discuss that very much now, because you're absolutely right. We don't want to get into the business of manifesting disasters and manifesting, awful things happening. But saying basically is at some point there's going to be a change and it's going to be quite a big one.
Yes, your book spoke to me in so many ways. I literally couldn't put it down because I've been saying on this podcast, and I'm a fairly new podcaster and I'm fairly new to spirituality, and I've had my own journey of sorts, but I have learned a few things along the way. And one of the things that I continuously say on this show is we are more powerful than we think. We are capable of more than we think, and that our words, our thoughts, our belief systems are much more important to our daily lives than we would ever imagine. And I thought your book explained that in spades, and that Asher really was able to confirm for me many of the things that I have been picking up on through my own spiritual journey, that he just solidified that we're true. The concept that we are co-creators of our reality here is a big one for me, that he really was able to explain in a manner that I've never heard anybody else explain before and makes sense.
Good. Oh, well, that's really gratifying to know. I've found a lot of the stuff, obviously I'm 40 years older than him. So in terms of the stuff I've read and the stuff I've watched and been to conferences and listened to, I've had a bit of a head start on him, but still he just comes up with things sometimes. And I think, whoa, that would never have crossed my mind. And I've never heard anyone else say that. So yeah, it's good that you feel that way too.
I absolutely did. It really did speak to me. Do you feel that humans, if we were to focus and work on these connections, that we would be able to perform telepathic connections with each other? Or what do you feel about, your connection to Asher in that way, or how it came about and how you were able to be nonverbal? Because at some point in the book, I believe he kind of separates his physical from physical persona and you leave his physical self to his 3D life and you kind of start communicating with him only telepathically or using remote viewing. So let's talk a little bit about what that transition was.
Yeah, that was a big one actually. But he, all through his later teens, he found it very hard to reconcile, I suppose, the two sides of himself, because there was a part of him that just wanted to be a regular and have mates and hang out and do all the stuff that ordinary people did. And he very quickly learned that if he talked about any of this woo-woo stuff to anybody other than me, he got short shrift. Nobody else wanted to know about it. And they all said he was delusional or crazy or whatever. So it was sort of our secret. And he loved exploring it. He was really interested in it. He was really wanting to go further. And the remote viewing, which is something we just decided to try out and see because we watched a video on somebody else doing it and thought that looks fun. And he took to it like a duck to water. He was brilliant at it. And he loved doing all this stuff. But at the same time, he said, I feel like I'm two different people. I just feel like there's part of me doesn't believe in this stuff and just daily life. And there's another part of me that doesn't just believe it, but lives it. And so he just, yeah, split himself into two, which is where he's still at, really. He's
Oh,
living that.
interesting.
Yeah, he's just living that daily life. And he said we have so much energy that's not just in our physical bodies. Like when you go to sleep at night, your consciousness mostly moves out of your body, but you leave enough consciousness in your body for it to be able to carry on breathing, carry on digesting food and not smothering itself in the pillow and stuff like that. So there's some consciousness in the body, but not very much. Most of it's off doing whatever you're doing in dreams. And he said, my stuff's like that. It's like sort of extreme dreaming, if you like. But he said, I can move out and just leave enough in my physical body for it about its daily life. And he said, you don't have to concern yourself with that. It's nothing to do with you anymore. You just leave that side of me alone and concentrate on this side. That's the way we've left it.
What kind of concepts have most that you have learned from Asher that have most impacted you on the daily life? Like what are the things that you have mostly gleaned? I know this is going over decades of experiencing remote viewing and telepathic connections and these amazing insights and into the realms and what our consciousness is and how energy works. And the entire book is just filled with concepts that will really make you change your perspective on what and who we are in general. And what do you feel like how have you changed the most to your relationship with Asher as far as how you look at the world from your perspective now?
Oh, well,
That's a big one.
I-
It's a big one.
about 100% really.
Yeah.
I think I said at the beginning of A Mind Beyond Words, I live two different lives as he does, but I've had to as well because I've still got my family, my old friends, but I've got this completely different life, which, yeah, there's the telepathy with him, but I've also moved into circles of people who are more spiritually minded, and because they're the people I'm on the same frequency now. I have to work quite hard at, I'm sure if you've been on a similar journey, you've had it too. I have to work quite hard at sort of getting down to talking about everyday ordinary stuff because it's not quite so relevant anymore. So, yeah, the thing that you mentioned earlier, the fact that we are the creators, I think is absolutely so important. And it made me realize that for so long we've given our power away to others, whether it
Yeah.
be to gods that we've worshipped, or to religious leaders or gurus or scientists or the experts in the white coats. But it's always, somebody else will tell me what to do and how to live and to know that we've got this power in ourselves, that we make the choices, that we can control our lives. If we don't make the choices, life will make a sort of default choice for us, but we can influence it to a huge degree. And Ash goes into a lot of detail on that. So not only are we able to control our lives, we're also contributing to what I call big C consciousness, the whole shebang. So, yeah, that's one of the huge things for me. And
Yes.
the other is the role and potential of the people who our society labels disordered. The neurodivergent people, people with autism or other so-called disorders, disabilities, dysfunctions, who actually have, in a large degree, a closer link to what Asher would call the realms than
Yes.
the rest of us do. And they've got an awful lot to teach us.
That was another thing I wanted to kind of discuss a little bit about neurodivergent and neurotypical people, that there is a lot of confusion about maybe what autism is. And when you read the book, you start understanding that they live kind of in a different brainwave pattern where it makes them less able to interact in normal 3D, lower plane, uh, whether it be speech or using those emotions or being able to communicate in a 3D plane level, that they're much more capable of accessing higher realms of thought in different brainwave patterns that um, regular humans, would not be able to understand or even comprehend, being where most people are at in their spiritual journeys. It just wouldn't be something that they would probably even accept. Can you talk a little bit about what your thoughts are with the different brainwave patterns, how autistic people kind of communicate and view 3D and emotions and communication? What do you think?
Yeah. Yes, it's cool. It's a big subject, but I'll
It
try and give
is.
a potted history of it. Yeah, Asher started off by saying to me, oh, I will preface this by saying not every person with autism, not every neurodivergent person is going to identify with this. In fact, there's a lot who get really angry when people say, oh, if you've got autism, you're one of those spiritual people, aren't you? Because a lot of them don't recognize it or don't choose to follow it. I have a member of my own extended family who is neurodivergent, and they have experienced something. They suppress it like mad because they want to be normal and they don't want that side of it. And this person has said to me, oh, that stuff's really irritating. I just try really hard just to block it all out. And so, again, it's a choice, and not everybody is going to make that choice. Not everybody is going to choose to um, think along those lines. I think Asher is quite an extreme example of somebody who's almost made it his life's work. But what he told me is there's these brain states, and he asked me to check it on a search engine, and we came up with this delta, which is supposed to be where the brain's completely non-functional, and then theta, which is like the sort of extreme where you go in a deep meditation or when you're dreaming or something like that. The alpha state, kind of relaxed and fairly enlightened. Your beta state, which is the basics that we live in every day of our lives, the kind of nitty gritty 3D reality, and the gamma, which is the sort of fastest of all, which is fight or flight, or that panic mode, or extreme excitement, or great arousal, or something like that. And he said most neurotypical people, what the majority would call normal people, live most of their lives in the beta state. The beta state, that's their normal way of being. And if they can relax, or they do some mindfulness or meditation or something or the other, they might move into an alpha or even a theta state. But he said people like him, most of their most comfortable state is the theta state, which to us would be, really up in the clouds. And he said that's where they feel most comfortable. That is, you're more open to the spiritual side and much more closed off to the physical, everyday stuff, which is why a lot of people with autism say find crowds and, big shopping malls, having to deal with day-to-day stuff really stressful and difficult and overwhelming, but put them somewhere where, it's calm and peaceful and they can be out in nature or something, and they just come alive and they really love all of that, and that feels more comfortable to them. And so they find it difficult to fit into the world that neurotypical people have created. And that was quite a revelation to me.
Do you think that there seems to be more autistic people with us than there have been in previous generations?
Yeah.
Autism wasn't something that I grew up knowing about or learning about. It wasn't until I got a little later in life where you saw this prevalence of children being born and they were calling it autism, and there was you heard it everywhere. What do you think the reason is for that? Do you think it is tied to spirituality? Do you think that we are having children born on this planet because there is an impending shift? Do you have any thoughts on why there's so many instances of autism within our population nowadays?
Yeah. The short answer is yes to all the things you've just said. Yeah. I mean, as a teacher, working in mainstream school from the 1970s up to into the present century, I had many years of observing ordinary classes of children. And when I first started teaching, you'd very occasionally get one kid in the class who you'd say, oh, they're a bit different, or they've, got, a few issues. And by the time I left, there were at least 2 or 3 in every class. And people I know now, I mean, I've been out of teaching since about 2008, but people I know now who are working in schools say it's way more than that now. It's absolutely, and yes, certainly diagnosis is more sort of tight. They've got all their tests and things. You know that these children just have a different way of being. And Asher tells me that, yeah, he says with each generation, there's increasing numbers of people who have this ability to see or sense beyond the physical. And he said they have this multidimensional aspect that is going to help us through the changes that are coming up. So, yeah, they're here for a reason. It's not a disorder, and it's not an illness, and it's not something that needs to be cured. It absolutely isn't. What's got to be cured is our ability to tap into them and to pick up what they have to tell us.
How has your experience been with telling your story? I know for the most part, you do want to keep your privacy, your identity, and you're certainly trying to protect Asher's privacy and identity. From what I understand in the book, he is not open to being a public figure or anything of the sort. But how has your experience been telling your story to people? Is there a lot of pushback? Is there a lot of doubt? Is there ridicule? What has your experience been so far?
That's exactly what I was expecting, Christy, when I started on this journey. I mean, it's not my own identity that I'm trying to protect. It's definitely Ash's, because when we made the agreement that we were going to put this in a book and go public with it, if you like, he said, "We'll do it, but change your name, change my name, change all the names of the people in the story, and don't appear on screen, or if you do, blur your face or whatever," because he said, "I don't want people who know the two of us to say, "Oh, that must be," and then, start knocking at his door and asking him for predictions or something. He's a very shy person. He still has the autism, and he's everyday person. Very, he wants to keep himself to himself. So that's why we do that. So, yeah, that's the basis of it. So, sorry, what else did you ask me?
Well, have you had any pushback? Do
Oh, the
you have
pushback, yeah.
individuals in your life that, uh, you know, for lack of a better term, think you're not right in the head, think you've lost it, think that this is something you're making up, or how comfortable are people really hearing this story? Because if you're not in the spiritual world, if you haven't been exposed to anything like the principles of creation, manifestation, multi-dimensional beings, all of which I believe we are, um, it could be a very fantastical story that you're telling. And I'm just wondering if you've had any negativity based on telling a story that people would have a hard time comprehending if they're not already in alignment with some of these principles anyway.
I was absolutely expecting that. In fact, I was really dreading putting my head above the parapet, because I really expected to be shot down. I expected to be called all sorts of things. I can think of two people since I started publicizing this, going out, selling the book at holistic fairs, talking online with people, and doing interviews like this one with you. I have had two people out of all the hundreds that I've come across who've said, "No, I can't take this. It's not for me." Everybody else who has spoken to me about it, I mean, obviously there's people who don't want to know, but say I'll be at a holistic fair and I'll set up my little stall and I'll have my banner and all the books out on the table, and I just stand. And some people take one look and walk straight on past, but every few there's somebody who'll turn up and they'll just walk straight up to me and say, "Tell me about this book. I want to know about it." And they're kind of drawn in like magnetism.
Yes.
It's really, really weird. And it happens again and again and again. And the same thing happens on social media. You just find people from all over the world just get drawn in and say, "Oh, I've had an experience something like this," or "My kid does something like this, and I've got an autistic member of the family and they've said this." And Asher told me from the start, the right people will find it. And that's what's meant to happen. And he's absolutely right. So no, so far I have been really, really fortunate, and people have been so supportive and so helpful, and like yourself, agreed to hide my identity, for Asher's sake. And yeah, I've just been amazed at how accepting people are and how many people just take it all as, yeah, that's what's really going on.
I have no doubts. I've been just mesmerized by the book. I couldn't put it down. There is nothing within me that feels like this is a falsehood, an exaggeration, an imagination, anything of the sort. There is no doubt in my mind that this is truth. His words. I find that our reality, our world, makes more sense now than it did to me 10 years ago when I was an atheist, after learning what's through my journey of opening up to spirituality and learning different concepts and being open to different non-mainstream ways of thinking. And I do feel like we're living in a time where people are frustrated with what the current thought of what life is and how we approach it. And I think they are open and willing to receive information that maybe otherwise they wouldn't have. And not everybody is going to awaken and expand their mind in this life. And I think most people maybe need to be a little shaken to be awakened. But I do feel like there are more people out there that are open to understanding that maybe we don't have everything figured out, and maybe there's more than just to us than materialism, and that that we are of a higher nature, multi-dimensional being, that we are capable of interacting on this 3D plane with more control, with more of a um, being able to create what experiences we want to have while we're here. And I am no longer afraid to die. I don't think that we ever die. We are beings of light in this avatar body, and we are here to learn and grow and expand and become more conscious, become more empathetic. And I think your journey is so amazing and important. And I hope that anybody who is listening to this show picks up the book. It's called A Mind Beyond Words, and it will transform the way you think about what our life is on this planet. Don't you think? I mean, it is such an important story, I find.
It'll transform things if you're ready to be transformed. And if you're not, that's fine. You probably won't pick the book up anyway. But
That's true.
everything you've said there, it echoes exactly the message that Asher and I have been trying to put across in the book. So yeah, I can see why you enjoyed it, and I can see, why we were drawn together to work here. So that's fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you. I cannot suggest enough that people go out and find this book and read it. There is so much more than we could ever fit into 1 hour. There's just little gleans of information about how reality works, about the realms, the the fact that we are just much more powerful creatures than we could ever imagine. The fact that you had the ability to communicate with Asher using um telepathic means, it was incredible. The remote viewing, his ability to communicate with you in ways that's completely are beyond anything that most people would accept. I love the book. I really wanted to reach a lot of people. I really am grateful and honored that you came on to tell your story. And, if there's another book in there, I'd love to have you back on the show to talk about that and promote that as well. I really
Oh
would.
yeah, that might happen. We'll see. Oh, thank you so much, Christy. I really appreciate your time and
Thank you
keep that.
for, I can't thank you enough for coming on. I personally think I work as an assistant director in TV and film. I'd love to turn this into a movie.
All
It is
right.
such a remarkable story. I was like, this would be an amazing movie. Amazing. With that, guys, we're going to go ahead. We're going to thank Jess for coming on the show. It was an amazing journey. Thank you for taking us on it. Pick up her book, A Mind Beyond Words. I highly recommend it. I could not put it down. And we'll see you next week on Fate, guys, from atheism to enlightenment. Bye, everybody. And that is a wrap on Jess Curzon with A Mind Beyond Words. I have so many thoughts about this episode. When I read her book, it really did ring true to me. And I know that having telepathic communications, remote viewing, astral projection, premonitions, the idea that we can co-create our reality are probably fantastical concepts that don't seem like I'm swimming in the realm of sanity. But the more and more I journey, the more and more I learn, the more and more I open my mind to different ways of perceiving that don't maybe align with what I have been taught my whole life, the more excited I am about what our lives are, how magical they are, the more I want to learn. I feel that Asher and Jess have a relationship that could really change many lives if you're open to this type of ability to expand what's beyond normal, as we would say in mainstream thinking of what we're programmed every day to believe what our lives are. And the more and more I'm swimming in this world, the more and more empty our lives feel. I mean, when you really think about what the human life is these days, it is an endless pursuit of acquiring things we don't need, going to a job we don't love, and enduring a lot of hardships that maybe if we had the ability to understand that we could have more of a control over what happened within our lifetime by following our inner intuitions, by being able to connect to a higher realm that would guide us. These are all concepts that are fascinating to me that in season 2 are going to be the cornerstone of what I want to put out on this show. I really want people to start opening their minds and being able to put little stories within your ether that are going to make your brain start turning on and thinking and contemplating a world that is beyond the one you know currently. And this is the perfect story. I really hope that after listening to this podcast, you pick up that book. It's on Amazon, it's on Barnes and Noble. It is, Asher has a way of describing what the parameters are for our reality in a way that you've never heard anyone explain it. I thoroughly believe that everything that Jess talked about today happened, that it is within our grasp to be much more telepathic, to be much more cognizant of the other side, the veil. And I just found it absolutely fascinating and it gave me hope. I'm still struggling with my health a little bit. It made me feel like I can heal myself. I absolutely can. And part of what is holding me back currently is my own belief system. Because once your own belief, your own intentions, your own vibrational signature that you put out into the universe, that will match and you will get that in return. So you have to be very mindful and very conscious of how you're thinking, what you're feeling. And I don't know, guys, I thought it was a fascinating discussion. I hope you pick up the book. I really want to press the boundaries as to what you will allow in your world to accept as a possibility, at least, maybe. And on that note, I'm going to go ahead and leave it there. I will put her website in the show notes. She does have a website. It's www.ashertree.com. It is a fascinating story. I think it's one that could really change how people view the reality in which we're living in. And I hope everybody picks up the book. I wish Jess and Asher well. I hope they continue their communications. I hope she puts another book out. And I hope he continues to enlighten the world as to what we're all doing here, the many layers in which we find ourselves swimming in. It's magical, it's exciting, and I hope you continue the journey with me and stay with me, and I will absolutely bring you some amazing stories this year in season 2. I have some great guests lined up. I have some great topics lined up, and I'm really excited to bring them to you. Until then, everybody, welcome to your fate, guys. I'll see you on the next episode. Bye.